This is a dangerous work of art. The BBC will only permit me to show it to you in slow motion. It consists of hundreds of flashing light bulbs, all pulsating at the speed of a human heart. They create dazzling patterns everywhere, even on the inside of the retina.
I think this is like looking at a Monet painting or something like this. Because you close your eyes and then you see all these like colors in front of you, and it's becoming very impressionistic in a very straightforward way. And the only thing is that you don't see it in the traditional way by looking at it, but you see it by closing your eyes. So it's maybe one of the very few works of art that can best be seen with closed eyes.
Holler belongs to a group of artists who are making a new kind of art. Some theorists call it relational. I think it could be a brand new ism. I've come to New York. I'm carrying a book by the French curator and art critic Nicolas Bourriaud. It's called Relational Aesthetics. It describes a new movement in art which I have never heard of. It says that it emerged in Europe and America in the 90s, while I was distracted by the YBAs. Bourriaud's book contains a long list of artists whom he views as relational. Among them, Vanessa Beecroft presents arrangements of scantily clad women in art galleries. Philippe Perrino bought the rights to a Japanese cartoon character. Then he and his artist friends made works of art with her, thus liberating a throwaway image from mass cultural narratives. Felix Gonzalez Torres created minimalist sculptures out of boiled sweets. And Rikrit Tiruvanija exhibited his own flat in an art gallery. Visitors came and cooked in his kitchen. Over the last 10 years, Bourriaud had curated several exhibitions of relational art all over the world. But his book was not on first reading easy to understand.
Artwork as social interstice. The possibility of a relational art, an art taking as its theoretical horizon the realm of human interactions and its social context, rather than the assertion of an independent and private symbolic space, points to a radical upheaval of the aesthetic, cultural and political goals introduced by modern art.
The 20th century had been full of isms. Impressionism, Fauvism, Cubism, Expressionism, Constructivism, Suprematism, Surrealism, Abstract Expressionism, Minimalism and Conceptualism, to name but a handful. But in recent times there'd been a disappointing lack of isms. I thought Nicolas Bourriaud's relational aesthetics could be the first ism of the 21st century, and I set out to test this hypothesis. My search for the new ism began with two Danish artists who had frequently appeared in Bourriaud's exhibitions. Their new piece consisted of a minimalist series of payphones.
Huh?
This is Sean.
Oh, hi, dear.
Hi.
Yes. I'm sorry. Well, we're eating dinner.
Oh, okay. I'm just calling. I'm at an art gallery opening, and it's an installation involving phones and like wiretapping. And there's people in the next room with like headphones and stuff listening. So it's interesting.
Okay. Well, can I call you back? We're having dinner.
What would you say is relational about it?
You need like the visitor to come in and play in order to give the work some meaning. When you go to a show with real minimalist works, like, you would also like them to be activated a bit, like that you could like climb some of the sculptures, so, you know, like sit on it, and it would look so much more groovy and up to date.
Elmgreen and Dragset's work seemed to me to be a step forward in art. Its sleek looks came from minimalism. The use of everyday objects was conceptual. The new element was ordinary people. In this piece, they hired household decorators to paint the walls of a gallery white over and over again for a day. And for another exhibition, the artist simply drilled a hole into the ceiling of the gallery. Visitors could climb a ladder and look into the flat on the floor above.
You very often make very artificial attempts to like kind of link like the art scene to its like social context or surroundings. And here we did it in a very, very basic way, you know, like the two worlds would meet through this hole.
Much to my surprise, this was a very difficult film to make. I approached many of the artists mentioned in Bourriaud's book, but some of them were not keen to appear in a program about relational aesthetics. Liam Gillick makes simple architectural structures with texts, such as this one. He's mentioned many times in Bourriaud's book. His work may be considered relational because they investigate the way architecture controls social activity. When I contacted Liam Gillick, he told me I was asking the wrong questions and put the phone down on me. I later found out he told another artist appearing in my program that I was dangerous. Angela Bullock told me not to ask the question why, and then missed our interview appointment. Other artists agreed to meet me, but when they did, they seemed to find my approach rather outdated. What ideas are represented in the sculpture?
None. This piece is like made of like 3 lamps that are linked together with like some wires, and these 3 lamps stand in 3 different rooms of the space where we are. So in order to encompass the object, then you have to circulate within the gallery through an artwork.
How did you evolve the pattern that's on the lamps?
I don't know, just a few little holes.
Do they like represent windows or doors?
I think they represent really nothing.
How are they specifically meant to alter the rooms or our relationship to the space?
3 lamps, 3 space. It's really simple.
Right. Philippe Perreno's lamp required a new way of understanding art. The idea was that art no longer had to mean anything, nor did it have to be something that was just looked at. It could be useful. It was just a lamp, priced at several thousand euros. In what way can this work be considered relational?
No idea. No idea, you tell me.
All artists hate to be categorized, but the relational artists often worked together. Philippe Perreno, Carsten Holler, Liam Gillick and Rik Tiravanija had even made a film together in which they attempted to express some of the ideas they share.
My nightmare is walking through the woods in the snow, surrounded by people talking about how nice it is to be walking through the woods in the snow.
Every person's nightmare is to be walking through the woods in the snow, with other people pointing out how nice it is to be walking through the woods in the snow, with other people pointing out how nice it is.
Walking in the woods, surrounded by people pointing out how nice it is to walk in the woods, right, or something. Yeah.
Surrounded by people.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nightmare. Like the new thing, for example, now is like the eco-tourism and ecology. Like you discover nature, but as a sort of like nice, harmless sort of like picture that we have to protect, right? Because it's already fucked up. I think that the apocalypse already happened, and we're all survivors.
What was the apocalypse?
I don't know, but it happened already.
This film also shows the artists share a political viewpoint. Like every other ism of the 20th century, relational art is left-wing. The relational worldview is like the plot of The Matrix, but with capitalism instead of killer robots.
Speculation is the genius of capitalism for finding new multiple forms of itself in a post-utopian world. That's why you get behavioural adjustments like casual Fridays, where you wear what you like to work. That's why you find pool tables in the middle of an office, as a way to encourage open, creative exchange. These are new forms of soft capitalism that make people feel good, while maintaining the old relationships.
Yeah, but maybe if people feel good, they're more likely to speculate and less likely to plan.
When you feel good, you are more willing to speculate and less likely to plan.
You know, we're still very much in this belief in the pursuit of happiness, achieving this by fulfilling the needs. I don't think this works. I think we have come to quite a degree of saturation of our needs. And post-utopian would be to give this up, this strive.
To be less goal-orientated.
The goal would be not to have a goal anymore. So that's a big goal. So how do you get beyond that?
I don't know. I had a goal which I wasn't prepared to abandon. To find out if relational art was a brand new ism. I went to meet the godfather, the author of the book, Nicolas Bourriaud, at his spectacular gallery. Bourriaud's gallery was full of relational works of art. They were interactive and political. I kicked around some footballs decorated with the heads of world leaders. My attention was drawn to works of art by Santiago Sierra. They were photographs of pieces he had made with specific social groups. In one work, he'd paid 300 African immigrants to dig holes in a grid in the middle of Spain. In another, he paid Eastern European prostitutes to perform S&M.
Is exactly showing the worst aspect of human relationships, today, which is hire people, make them slaves in a way, and exploiting them as much as you can. This is the interhuman sphere activities.
Right. Is it an ism?
No, actually. I never said relationism, for example. I wrote a book which was called Relational Aesthetics.
What is relational aesthetics?
It's a kind of ground of sensibility for today. Take the pop art of the 60s, for example, and you'll see that the common ground was the sphere of consumption, actually. Today, it totally shifted to the sphere of human relations.
Why is that?
That's why it makes sense.
Why?
Because we're not living in a consumption or production society anymore, but in a communication society.
It's almost an ism.
If you insist.
Bourriaud was being modest. Every ism in the 20th century had an art critic behind it who invented the term. Apollinaire coined Cubism. André Breton came up with Surrealism. Germano Chaland and Lucy Lippard pushed Conceptualism. Relational art fulfilled this criterion of ismicity.
In the book I was talking about 20 artists, actually, from New York till Tokyo, but now it's like spreading out. It's kind of impressive.
Tell me this, do you think there'll ever be a day when there'll be post-relational works of art?
I hope so,
I now thought I understood relational art. It used minimal forms to make political statements. It didn't like global capitalism. It often related to the space in which it was exhibited. Sometimes it was useful. I think there's a relational work of art we can make right here in this space, which I discovered just before you arrived over here. Have you seen these? Look. I think this is very cast and hollow, but anyway, look. You have to turn around.
But that's just lines going down. So where's the relational work of art in there?
It's about our relationship between the inside and the outside.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
In Britain, there are artists who seem relational, but they aren't called relational. They are called art for networks. One afternoon, I joined a gallery tour. The works of art in this exhibition fitted into Nicolas Bourriaud's thesis of an art of human relations.
If you follow these arrows, for example, in this kind of his schematic drawing, you can find out how it makes sense for him that brass bands have something to do with acid house and vice versa.
One work in particular attracted my attention.
Anna has for a long time been wanting to do this ice cream convention where she gets all the vans from around the UK, all the mobilers, and put them in Hyde Park, all on one day, a massive rally of ice cream vans. Okay.
After the guided tour, I had the opportunity to run relational aesthetics past the man who invented art for networks.
I hope there's more to it than me just picking anything out of the air and there being some affinity.
I don't think it's like that. I think it's almost an ism.
Maybe it's like a tendency, or there's obviously something in a lot of people's work that has an affinity with this idea of art for networks.
So why didn't you call it relational art?
Relational art is a weird one.
I'm going to say networks instead of relational every time. It goes artwork as social interstice. The possibility of a network art, an art taking as its theoretical horizon the realm of human interactions and its social context, rather than the assertion of an independent and private symbolic space, points to a radical upheaval of the aesthetic, cultural and political goals introduced by modern art. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
If I reread it and really considered it, yeah, I agree to anything.
The relationship between art for networks and relational art reminded me of previous relationships between global art movements and British artists. In the early 20th century, while Futurism, Cubism and Constructivism dominated European art galleries, British artists came up with Vorticism. The next day, I joined Anna Best as she researched her ice cream van convention.
I think the future of mobiling is on a downward spiral. This is our little stock room.
Why do you like that, Anna?
It looks like an artwork. It's like an Andy Warhol.
Now then, this is our little dairy.
Why have you chosen to work in the medium of ice cream?
Well, I suppose I'm looking at ice cream as a metaphor. It's not about the artist being in some way a magician making Magimix. It's more about how you put together the ingredients that are there already. And it's also time-based. It's got this kind of life to it where it melts and it's not there anymore. I'm really interested in art which isn't an object and which isn't there all the time, and so is ephemeral and time-based. So that's like ice cream. That's kind of
That's a metaphor for time and art.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like her relational European counterparts, Anna used everyday objects to make works of art. Instead of payphones, she had ice cream vans. Instead of adults, she had children. Like the Europeans, Anna's work of art would serve a political purpose. It would bring together oppressed ice cream van owners from all over Britain and give them a voice. It says here, the possibility of a relational art, an art taking as its theoretical horizon the realm of human interactions and its social context, rather than the assertion of an independent and private symbolic space, points to a radical upheaval of the aesthetic, cultural and political goals introduced by modern art. Is this what, are we in a relational work of art?
Yeah.
Did you know that you were a relational artist?
Not until I met you. No, I didn't. No, I don't know. I don't know the terminology.
Do you mind me calling you that?
I think it's quite a good term. Relational.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because, well, maybe compared with other terms that I'm thinking of, engaged practice, or engaged, or
that's terrible.
Worse is socially engaged.
Oh, I don't like that at
Don't
all.
like it.
No, that's not very good.
So relational.
And I don't think art for networks is going to catch on. Do you?
No, I don't think it is. No, that's different.
It's not punchy enough.
Art for networks.
But relational is kind of good because you could have, it sort of trips off the tongue, and you could imagine you could have cubism, fauvism, surrealism, conceptualism, expressionism, minimalism, relationalism.
Relationalism. Not sure. Relationism.
The artist mentioned most frequently in Nicolas Bourriaud's book was also heavily into edible media. His work was on the book cover. He was perhaps the most relational artist of them all, but his art was also the most difficult for me to understand. He was famous for cooking dinner in art galleries. Afterwards, he exhibited his dirty pots, pans and plates as installations. He sold crates of empty beer bottles as multiples. When he listed the media with which he made his works of art, they always included the phrase, lots of people. Rikrit Tiruvanija is represented by one of New York's leading art galleries, the Gavin Brown Enterprise. I went there to meet Gavin.
The first thing, a piece of his I ever saw was those stacked beer bottles, which I thought were irritating at the beginning. I found the work quite irritating to begin with, and I suppose that stayed with me for a while.
Well, what won you over?
Just a sense of liberty to the work, I don't know.
I wasn't sure if Rikrit's work was art, but that might be proof that it is. Ignorant people have always reacted to important new art movements with the exclamation, "That's not art."
I've got this book here by Nicolas Bourriaud called Relational Aesthetics. Have you heard of this?
No comment. I've heard of it, yeah.
Does the term mean anything to you? Do you think there's such a thing?
I'm not sure it means anything to him, I don't know. Don't you think if you wanted to look at the possibility of art that's theoretical horizon is the realm of social interactions and human interaction, social context, you just go out and meet people and have a good life? I mean, to me it seems as though a lot of this work is people who are scared to live a life in the first place, and incredibly unradical people who play a game of a radical life within a very safe confines of some Kunsthalle or other museum in Germany or France.
And why, for you, doesn't Rikrit belong to that?
Oh, often he does, you know. But that's part of the reason I love it, because he's so willing to fail. But you know, a lot of it is incredibly pretentious.
What about this piece?
I thought that piece was a particular revelation.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Gavin seemed concerned about the quality of relational art, but this was an issue I wanted to avoid. All I was interested in was the ism. Rikrit was teaching art at New York's prestigious Columbia School. He had invited me round for dinner with his students in his dark flat. Thanks to Rikrit, I was finally to understand relational aesthetics.
I would say I never make work from having to make something new. You know, I will always work from, some idea of ready-made. You know, so I like to think that it's just kind of like, you know, you take Duchamp's urinal, put it back on the wall, and just piss into it. I mean, and I'm just pissing into it, along with other people, hopefully.
Theoretically, Rickrits' art had a logic to it. 100 years ago, Duchamp had invented the ready-made by putting a urinal in an art gallery and exhibiting it as sculpture. Rickrit was going further. He made art that was useful, and he took human beings and their activities and exhibited them. His subject and his medium was raw life itself.
With my work, it's not so much what you see, it's what you don't see. It's not about documenting something, it's not about making a video, it's just a clock that's running.
I don't understand.
You know, it would be like if you came to this interview and instead of having camera on us, it would be, the camera would be on the pot cooking.
But if there's nothing actually happening inside the video frame and the thing that's happening is you can't see it, then why watch it for more than 20 seconds?
Because you want to wait and find out whether something actually happens in the next 5 days.
I could see why Rickrit wanted to make works of art like this. We live in an age of sound bites, websites and video games. No wonder the relational artists were so keen to use real life as art, with real people and uncut slices of time. Relational art was the next logical stage for art. That's what made it the new ism. But I was biased. The fact was that I too had once been a relational artist, and years before Rickrit. Back in the mid-80s, I had made works of art with food and lots of people.
I'm making the Jackson Pollock salad.
In this kind of Brahmin outfit.
Yeah. Then I decided eventually I wasn't very good and I stopped. What do you think? Does it look
Looks
like
good.
art?
It's too bad you stopped.
Maybe I was the first.
You were.
Or
you just happened to have done it in the wrong place.
Yeah, like Cambridge.
Like Cambridge. I mean, who cooks in an art gallery in Cambridge? It's important to be at the right place at the right time.
I'm on my way to the Venice Biennale. Rickrit Tiravanija is curating a whole section of the art fair this year. As I watch the palaces drift by, I wonder if one day people will talk about relational art the same way they talk about Renaissance art. Perhaps they will even refer to our age as the relation. Rickrit's show had free giveaway bags. It was full of relational artists from all over the world. It was a great exhibition. I wanted to bring it to London, but I would have to change the name. 10 years ago, the Royal Academy held a legendary exhibition of young British artists called Sensation. My show would be the follow-up to that.
Wow! Oh, relation. That's beautiful.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think it's a very, very good comment.
Would you be in it?
Of course we will.
Of course we will.
Anytime.
Yeah. Look, here you are.
You're gonna have a show in 2004.
Yeah, called Relation.
That's good.
Would you be in it?
If you turn the Royal Academy into a space like that, I'll do it.